So, welcome. Sorry for that delay. Welcome to the October 18th edition of LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. This week, I picked out the 12 best, most newsworthy clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows on the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for which would be a really informative, educational, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all tonight. I put a link down to my clip list, which I seem to have dropped when I couldn't get the thing started right there. Did everybody see how I was freezing? Were you all reacting to how I was frozen? Maybe not. I did freeze there for a minute. But I'm happy to bring you my topic tonight, which is Trump losing to Biden COVID question mark. And I chose that topic because all the polls, the election is still 16 days away. Biden's lead is pretty close to what Hillary Clinton's lead was at this point in the election 4 years ago, so you can't take anything for granted, but Biden's lead has been much more consistent and Trump has never gotten as close as he did to Hillary Clinton. There are reasons to be a little more hopeful, but there is definitely evidence that Trump is losing the election. And I think he also lost the dueling town hall debate, which I'll talk about a little more when I get to the SNL parody of the town halls in just a minute. But I also think Trump is losing to COVID. I mean, because of his botched response to the coronavirus pandemic, which as he goes around holding these like super spreader events and sometimes in hot spots like Wisconsin just makes him look worse and worse. And as I'll show with some clips coming up, the next few months could be the worst part of the pandemic for the United States, not just leading up to the election, but then in the couple months after I'll talk about that somewhat dark subject when I get to those clips. But also stay tuned to the end when I show the other reason I think Trump is losing, because people are just tired of basically what assholes the Trumps are, Trump especially, of course, but Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, is on again this week. Now he's with Jake. She's on with Jake Tapper, and Jake Tapper really cross-examines her brutally. I think the thing that made the most news was when Jake Tapper said that he didn't think it was fun. The lock her up chants weren't fun when she claimed, "Oh, they're just having fun at the rallies." But where he really cross-examines her is at the end of the interview. It's so brutal. I think maybe it should be called getting tappered. You can stay tuned. That's the final. That's clip number 12. But before that, like I promised, the political comedy. I'm going to show you the Saturday Night Live cold open that is a parody of the dueling town halls, which I discussed. I made a live stream where I compared 3 clips from one of the town halls to 3 clips from the other. And I don't know so much that they were dueling. Like I was saying, they showed Trump as kind of an asshole, a like dishonest blowhard, while Joe Biden is sort of this genial, older, bland, centrist politician from the good old days before you had to, take anti-anxiety medicine to watch the news or whatever. And the thing I'm going to show you in the cold open here is Jim Carrey's impression of Biden, which I said I didn't really like, and I'm showing it for the first time. I think also the way they parodied the Biden part of the debate plays into Trump's label of Sleepy Joe Biden. He's like kind of out of it and rambling in the parody, but I actually thought he was pretty cogent in the town hall. I put a link down in the video description to my town hall, my dueling town hall live stream debate replacement clip roundup if you want to watch that. which includes the interaction with the real person Cedric Humphrey, which I don't think was parodied well in this upcoming clip, for reasons I'll discuss after I show it to you. And it also ends with Alec Baldwin's Trump that I'll talk about with you a little bit after we watch that first clip together. I've kind of edited together some of the Biden parts and some of the Trump parts. The whole thing is almost 13 minutes long. Of course, the whole cold open is available down at a link in the video description, but I will talk about it with you, the 3 minutes or 2 minutes 44 seconds of it that I edited together to talk about with you after we watch together over here.
Okay, now, Nicholas, where the hell are you? Nicholas?
I'm up here.
Huh?
Go ahead.
Hey. Yeah, here's the deal. Unlike the president, I actually have a plan.
Oh, okay. Great. What is it?
A plan? It's a detailed proposal for doing or achieving something.
No, I mean, what's your plan?
Oh, right. Well, let me start with a story mixed with a complicated math problem. If you have 3 million doses of vaccine and the vaccine leaves Chicago at 10 a.m., what time would it arrive in Washington? And please, show your work.
Good evening, America. I am surprise badass Savannah Guthrie. And if you were angry at NBC for doing this town hall, just let me get a few questions in and I think you'll thank me. Joining me tonight is President Donald Trump.
Thank you, Serengeti. It's great to be here. Even though, woman.
And that brings us to 1939, a year when I went to the World's Fair and met the real Mickey Mouse. Does that answer your question? If you want to find me after the town hall, we can talk some more.
Some more?
Our next question is from a pro-life millennial, so yikes, good luck.
My question is, did you nominate Judge Barrett to strike down Roe v. Wade? Because that would be pretty chill of you, TBH.
That's a beautiful question. Thank you. I didn't tell Amy Conan. I didn't tell Amy Conan O'Brien to vote anyway on any issue. Some people, some very brilliant legal minds say that Roe v. Wade should be overturned and burned in a trash can like Antifa is burning all of my ballots because everyone knows the radical left are trying to steal this election. They're taking down statues which are full of Trump votes. That's where people place their votes, is into statues, and Antifa is stealing them and changing them Trump to Kathy Griffin.
Okay.
And they had that woman in the background who was nodding. I can't remember her name, but it turns out she's an immigration attorney in Florida who I think ran as a Republican for Congress and is a big Trump supporter. Or somebody posted the name in the comments to my town hall, my dueling town hall live stream clip roundup. And the other thing I thought was great that I forgot to mention in that, or I guess I said a lot of things I didn't think were great before I showed the clip, but one thing I liked was Kate McKinnon's Savannah Guthrie. Not like a perfect impression, but I think it was kind of the SNL cast response to some of the backlash NBC got by scheduling the Trump town hall in opposition to the Biden town hall. You know, Biden announced first, and then with ABC, and then Trump scheduled at the same time. Although the one from Biden went 90 minutes, and I thought was much more informative and everything, as I was saying. But the thing I kind of mentioned how they took the Cedric Humphrey question that I covered. Cedric Humphrey was a progressive black activist who said that he also gave kind of a tough question to Biden which the SNL parody made it seem like Biden didn't get any tough questions. A tough question about, what do you say to people like me other than you ain't black, which was definitely confrontational. And I thought Biden gave a long, detailed answer. A lot of his answers were long, cogent, detailed. If you want to watch my entire commentary on the town hall, like I said, there's a link down in the video description. But it made it seem in the parts I edited together there that the questioner didn't, when Biden said, we can talk later, what, you want to talk more? But actually, apparently, Biden stayed half an hour after his town hall and talked to the real Cedric Humphrey. And I noticed, I found Cedric Humphrey's Twitter feed, and he's actually going to vote for Biden. So I don't want reality to impinge too much on satire, but I wanted to make that point. And then the last point I'll make about the cold open is I like the way they brought up that Roe v. Wade question. And I talked in my roundup of the town hall how Trump was totally dishonest, not even trying to say that he was nominating judges to overturn Roe v. Wade, even though that's something he ran on in the past. And it also reminds me that if you want to see the video I made about Amy Coney Barrett, not about Roe v. Wade, but about how I think she might be weak on First Amendment law, it's sort of a take that I haven't seen anywhere else. It's based on my own legal expertise on the First Amendment, such as it is, since I am a lawyer who worked in that area somewhat. There's a link down in the video description to that other live stream I did on Thursday, I think it was. It's called Anti-Protest Barrett, Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett's weakness on First Amendment law. So there's a link to that in the video description. If you that's about half hour long if you want to see me talk about that. But now I'm finally going to get to the news summaries, and most of them do mention the surging coronavirus cases. Face the Nation the most, as I will talk about when I get to that clip. The one that totally downplays it, of course, is Fox News. This is a big Fox News Sunday, Fox News bias night, or I guess it was a big Fox News bias morning on Fox News Sunday this morning. That I'll talk about that when I get to that clip, but I'm going to start with the longest and maybe the best news summary again this week. NBC News' Meet the Press news summary with Chuck Todd explaining, well, I don't have to cover the town hall too much or even Amy Coney Barrett too much because I already did live streams on those topics earlier in the week, but I think all of it makes it into this news summary that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good Sunday morning. As if we hadn't faced enough already in this year, 2020 is about to deal us two more challenges. First, in just over 2 weeks, our deeply divided country is going to have an election that will reveal its character and direction over the next 4 years. And our new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, by a 50 to 34% margin, registered voters say they are better off now than they were 4 years ago. Good news for President Trump, right? Well, at the same time, by a 58 to 38 margin, voters say the country is worse off than it was 4 years ago. So what do those seemingly contradictory results tell us? That this year, it is not the economy, stupid. It's the coronavirus. Which brings us to the second challenge, a frightening new surge of infections and COVID-19 deaths. In recent weeks, we've experienced an increase in cases that looks very much like the beginning of a third peak, with Friday hitting the highest one-day total since July 24th, when we were in the middle of peak 2. In the past 2 weeks, 28 states and Washington, D.C. have seen case numbers increase by 25% or more. With the virus the greatest threat to the president's reelection, Mr. Trump routinely insists that we are rounding the corner. Rounding the corner. Or are we really going in circles?
We win Wisconsin. We win the whole ball game.
President Trump campaigning in a handful of states he won 4 years ago.
We're going to win the state of North Carolina. We're going to win the state of Florida. I love Georgia. We're going to win the state of Michigan.
Trailing Biden nationally by 11 points, the president is beginning to talk about losing.
Could you imagine if I lose my whole life? What am I going to do? I'm going to say, I lost to the worst candidate in the history of politics. I'm not going to feel so good. Maybe I'll have to leave the country. I don't know.
He is arguing his fundraising numbers, which fall far short of Biden's, are a choice.
I could raise more money. I'd be the world's greatest fundraiser, but I just don't want to do it.
And dwelling on his 26-point deficit among women.
I think suburban women like me. And frankly, I've saved your way of life. I've saved the American dream, but they keep saying Trump has a problem.
Mr. Trump is spending most of his time on the trail focused on his personal grievances.
The media has become crazed, and the big tech companies have become crazed. But it's very unfair. You know, it's so unfair. You should lock them up. Lock up the Bidens. Lock up Hillary.
Republicans on Capitol Hill are beginning to distance themselves.
I'm now looking at the possibility of a Republican bloodbath in the Senate. It's going to be, what the heck were any of us thinking that selling a TV-obsessed, narcissistic individual to the American people was a good idea? It is not a good idea.
Y'all have a good chance of winning the White House.
As coronavirus cases rise sharply around the country,
we've had many record-setting days recently for hospitalizations, new cases, and COVID-19 deaths.
2,532 new cases reported since yesterday, which is our highest one-day record.
Utah is now facing its most dire episode yet.
President Trump is denying the reality of the numbers.
We're rounding the corner.
Turn the corner. My Lord. It's not disappearing. In fact, it's on the rise again.
And the president continues to make false claims about mask wearing.
I'm okay with masks. I tell people wear masks. But just the other day, they came out with a statement that 85% of the people that wear masks catch it.
And when a president doesn't wear a mask or makes fun of folks like me when I was wearing a mask for a long time, then, people say, well, it mustn't be that important.
On that issue, Republicans are pushing back.
I was the one who said we need to wear a mask, practice social distancing.
I always do promote the CDC regulations.
I let my guard down, and it was wrong. It was just a big mistake.
And joining me now is the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar. Secretary Azar, welcome back.
And notice Alex Azar, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, was on Meet the Press, NBC. I don't know, did they work that out somehow by doing that town hall, the competing town hall with ABC? Because you'll see Jake Tapper in the next clip I'm about to show you say that he, once again, like he did last week, goes through the litany of people he tried to get, all the doctors and administration officials, and he mentions, you'll see he mentions the Secretary of Health and Human Services would not come on CNN State of the Union. All he could get was Lara Trump, who he's going to tapper. Like I said, Lara Trump gets tappered in clip number 12. I finally found my clip list down on the floor here. And, one thing, that they did have a clip from the town hall that I should have shown, because there were a couple times in the town hall where President Trump claimed that there was some CDC study saying 85% of people who wore masks got COVID-19. And that's what the study said, is that people, it was actually, they said they had been to restaurants where they had worn masks, but they had taken them off at the restaurant. And it was actually the poor mask usage that the CDC study was highlighting, not that the masks actually cause you to get COVID. And I'll talk about masks a little more when I get to the Scott Atlas clip, and also the Jason Miller clip from Fox News Sunday. But I want to get to the next news summary first. What else? And there was one other thing that I forgot to say. It was a good news summary. It definitely mentioned the surging cases, just like everybody did except for Fox. And you'll see here, Jake Tapper starts off shaking our heads. SMH, I guess. The SOU is SMH. The State of the Union this week is shaking our heads, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch the CNN State of the Union news summary together over here.
Hello, I'm Jake Tapper in Washington, where the State of our Union is shaking our heads in disbelief. There are just over 2 weeks until Election Day, and President Trump seems to be attempting to make up for troubling numbers in the polls by spreading nastiness, disinformation, and potentially, in his rallies, the coronavirus. Saturday, the president held 2 rallies in the swing states of Wisconsin and Michigan, both without required social distancing or masks, choosing to spend his time lobbing insults, including attacks against the governor of Michigan, despite the domestic terrorist plot against her. Overshadowing the president's efforts, the devastating reality that the coronavirus is far from defeated. It is instead surging again in the United States. Friday, the U.S. recorded more than 70,000 new cases, the highest number in one day since July. And 10 states recorded their highest single-day case counts ever. Only 2 states across the country are trending in the right direction, Missouri and Vermont. To date, the virus has infected more than 8 million people in the U.S. and killed more than 219,000 Americans. I want to note, in this critical time, we believe that it is important for you to hear from the Trump administration about their efforts to fight the virus. So we requested members of the task force, including Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, the HHS secretary, the CDC director, the head of NIH, the head of the FDA, the president's doctor, or the chief of staff, the national security advisor, the White House communications director, Jared Kushner, Ivanka Trump, the secretaries of state or treasury or defense, and on and on. The White House declined to make anyone from the Trump administration available to answer questions about the pandemic today. Joining us now to talk about the campaign from the president's campaign, senior advisor and the president's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump. Lara, thanks so much for joining us. Let's talk about some campaign activities. President Trump.
And like I said, stay tuned to the final news clip 12, where Lara Trump gets tappered. I guess he's mad that all they would send was Eric Trump's wife, and none of those many officials that they requested and were not allowed to interview. Although I did, like I said, Secretary of Health and Human Services is over. Alex Azar is on Meet the Press. That will be clip number 8 coming up. But I think Jake Tapper there covered 3 of the biggest, most important stories there. There was the shaking our heads that Trump is spending the end of the campaign, what was it, spreading nastiness, disinformation, and possibly COVID-19. I think he is still the super spreader in chief, as they say. And he did show that the cases are, we hit a new spike in cases, almost 70,000 cases in a day. That's a new spike we haven't seen since last July. It looks like we're going into the worst part of the pandemic. That's, by the way, I'm wearing pandemic peach this week because this could be the worst 3 months coming up. You'll see that in clips 9 and 10. Michael Osterholm on NBC and then Scott Gottlieb on CBS, pretty much saying Osterholm says 6 to 12 weeks. Scott Gottlieb says next 3 months that are going to be like the darkest days of the pandemic for the United States. And so that was covered, I think, quickly on State of the Union, more in depth on Meet the Press. Even comes up here in George Stephanopoulos' slightly less than 1 minute news summary at the beginning of ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, throwing in the persistent unemployment, which that's I guess a little gotcha at the Trump administration 16 days before the election. And I will talk about that news summary a little more with you after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. 2 weeks and 2 days ago in this race for the White House, and President Trump down in the polls facing persistent unemployment, a new surge in COVID cases, is barnstorming the country to rally his troops, repeating his favorite lines. Late last night in Wisconsin, which set new coronavirus records on Thursday and Friday, he insisted we're rounding the corner on the pandemic. Just hours after laying into Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, the target of a domestic terror plot revealed just last week.
And then I guess they said she was threatened. Right? She was threatened. And she blamed me. You got to get your governor to open up your state, okay? And get your schools open. Get your schools open. The schools have to be open, right? Lock them all up.
And that's where we begin with our first guest, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Ooh, and I will have a Nancy Pelosi clip coming up where Nancy Pelosi talks about the final 2 days of the possible coronavirus relief act that they're working on. They have like 48 hours and then it's dead until after the election. And I'll talk about why I think that's important when I get to clip 11. But like I said, I thought George Stephanopoulos did a good job of, even in an even shorter space, summing up some of the big issues there from this week. But actually, the best of the news summaries may have been the one from CBS News' Face the Nation. I edited it somewhat. They actually had 3 different reporters. It starts off with Margaret Brennan definitely emphasizing the coronavirus surge as the most important story. Although in the little teaser before, they do like a little teaser before she comes in and says, good morning, welcome, or whatever she says at the beginning. They did mention the news story that's been so big on the right, the Hunter Biden laptop story, although it only got brought up in CBS News' Face the Nation in terms of asking one of their guests as to whether it was Russian disinformation, not really talking about it in terms of the contents, which is good, I guess. But that did come up on CBS News' Face the Nation, and I sometimes say that they're kind of like Fox News light, because they take sort of the more of all the actual journalistic news outlets. They have the most conservative spin most of the time, I would say. While Fox News, of course, if you've read the book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room, you know that it was created to be a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party. Sometimes journalism does occur sort of coincidentally on Fox News, but so that's the differentiation between a more conservative spin on CBS versus the actual propaganda outlet on Fox News, where sometimes journalism occurs. But one thing I always have to, CBS could be the, COVID broadcasting system as far as I'm concerned. If you've been watching every Sunday and listening to everything I said, you know that CBS News' Face the Nation was covering the outbreak of COVID-19 in China when nobody else was covering it. And at the time I said they're either hyping the threat or they're the only ones covering the most important story that no one else is covering. And it turned out to be number 2, as we all know. So I always have to say that when I talk about CBS News' Face the Nation, their coverage of the coronavirus. I'm showing you the beginning here, and then Mark Strassman does a report. After that comes Elizabeth Palmer talking about how there's a surge in Europe. You'll see later Scott Gottlieb will tell us that Europe is a few weeks ahead of the United States, so it's kind of seeing our future again. And apparently Prague is in big trouble. That's has one of the biggest outbreaks I am not showing. And then Weijia Zhang did a report from the campaign trail that had a lot of the political stuff put in the context of the coronavirus outbreak. I'm not showing you that, but there's a link down in the video description to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel where basically the entire program is split into segments and you can watch the whole thing for free. I'm just going to show you the first 3 minutes or a little under 3 minutes with Margaret Brennan, then Mark Strassman, who always reports from Atlanta, as I point out week after week. There was one week when they told us he's always in Atlanta because every week he knocks on the door of the CDC and asks for an interview, and every week they say, no, not this week, Mark. So I guess he's still there, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary from CBS together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Coast to coast and around the world, the number of new coronavirus infections continues to rise. There are almost 40 million cases worldwide, more than 8 million of them right here in the U.S. On Friday, there were 69,000 new reported cases. That's the highest since July. With just over 2 weeks until Election Day, Americans are now able to vote in all 50 states, and they are going to the polls in record numbers. We've got a lot to get to. We begin this morning with CBS News national correspondent Mark Strassman in Atlanta.
COVID America's third wave is so widespread, blindfolded, you could throw darts at a map and probably hit a hotspot, like Colorado.
This is the most since late May.
And Nashville.
Our key metrics are not going in the right direction.
and Ohio.
This thing has roared back.
Roaring by any measure into a public health crisis. 26 states are in the red zone for new infections. In all, 36 states have new cases trending up. 5 states have positivity rates higher than 20%. Especially shocking, South Dakota's rate, 36%, and Iowa, just under 50%. Madison, Wisconsin responded by opening a 2-way drive-through. On one side, people pull in for a COVID test. On the other, they get a flu shot.
We're really trying to prevent a twindemic. We don't want a lot of flu and COVID happening at the same time.
COVID's also on the minds of voters and these poll workers in California. PPE is a must. In the Houston area, election workers have their temperatures taken every day.
Voters are not screened because it is their constitutional right to vote. We cannot prevent them from entering a voting center.
With 16 days until the election, early voters keep stampeding to the polls. From coast to coast, masked voters spent the day in lines. In Nevada, standing for 4 hours. In Georgia, more than 10 hours. Pandemic or not, election experts predict Americans may cast a record 150 million ballots. For all the talk that a vaccine is imminent, COVID America's next few months could be rough. With colder weather, holiday travel, and gatherings, disease experts predict the viral spread could accelerate. The spike in new cases could be dramatic and daunting. Margaret, that new vaccine can't get here too soon.
Mark Strassman in Atlanta, thank you. The recent spike in coronavirus cases is prompting new lockdowns throughout Europe. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Liz Palmer is in London. Good morning.
And like I said, before I showed the clip, Elizabeth Palmer has a report from Europe where things are not looking good. There's a link down in the video description to the CBS News Face the Nation YouTube channel where they have that report. Also, the Weijia Zhang report that kind of covers the political campaigns like you saw in the previous news summaries. But, you know, the next news summary, some weeks I stretch a little to find some Fox News bias in the Fox News Sunday news summary, but not this week. I showed how everyone else covered the COVID-19 crisis, the surge that's coming, that cases we're at like 70,000 cases a day at a peak not seen since July, that they're only I think Missouri and Vermont are the only 2 states that are trending in the right direction out of the 50 states. Things are going really poorly, not just through November 3rd, but through pretty much the end of the year. And through New Year's, things are going to look pretty bleak. But I started watching this Fox News Sunday news summary, and I thought, how long is it going to take them to mention coronavirus or COVID-19? And wait, I dropped my notes, my clip list here, but you'll see that's what Chris Wallace in the beginning never mentions coronavirus or COVID-19. And then they have 2 reports, one from David Spunt reporting from the Trump campaign, and then Jacqui Heinrich reporting from the Biden campaign. They never mention coronavirus or COVID-19 anywhere in the David Spunt report. They mention the lockdown in Michigan, and they do mention the whole lock her up thing that you saw in the previous news summaries where they chanted lock her up about the governor of Michigan who was the victim of a kidnapping plot that was foiled before anything happened to hurt anyone or whatever. But so they do cover that, and they mention the lockdown, and she says that, you know, people who are trying to save lives are being threatened. They show Governor Whitmer's tweet about that, but they still don't explicitly mention COVID-19 or coronavirus. And then you get to the Jacqui Heinrich report, and she finally mentions it at the end when she mentions that vice presidential candidate Kamala Harris, a couple people on her team were diagnosed with COVID-19. And even though they never, and nowhere do they mention surging cases of coronavirus and all the bad stuff you heard on all those other news summaries, especially CBS. And of course, they fit in extensive coverage of the Hunter Biden laptop scandal that broke in the New York Post, which of course is owned by the same, Rupert Murdoch and the same company that owns Fox News, which they never mention. None of the coverage. It's something they used to say on Fox News even a few years ago. They would say, whenever they mentioned the New York Post or the Wall Street Journal, they would say, of course, owned by our parent company. They don't even tell you that anymore. And anyway, I think I've pre-criticized this clip pretty clearly. And I guess before I show it, it looks like I'm almost up to 300 viewers on the live stream. And I also wanted to thank, I saw I got a couple super chat contributions, Nelson 100, Lulu Girl, of course regulars. I appreciate the financial support through super chat. There's a join button down below the video if you want to become a monthly YouTube member, and even better in terms of the percentage of the proceeds I get, there's a link down in the video description to Patreon to become a monthly patron, or PayPal to give a direct contribution. At the $5 level, you get this hashtag LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker, and at the $10 level, you get the sticker and the Constitution, ACLU Constitution. If you can send me a shipping address to send them to you, I always like to mention that at some point, do my little e-begging thing at some point in the broadcast. And now I will move on to the Fox News bias that I promised you. Like I said, how much do they talk about the COVID-19 surge that you saw in all the other news summaries? Not anywhere near enough, as I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
And hello again from Fox News in Washington. With just 16 days and counting, we're now in the home stretch of this campaign. President Trump is trying to shore up support in states he carried in 2016, while former Vice President Joe Biden is calling on Democrats' best weapon, Barack Obama. And it's 4 days till the last presidential debate. We begin with Fox team coverage. Jacqui Heinrich is tracking Joe Biden's campaign. But let's start with David Spunt in Carson City, Nevada, where the president holds a rally later today. David.
Chris, this is the president's second visit to Nevada in 40 days. 4 years ago, he lost this state, and right now he is behind in the polls here. President Trump full steam ahead on the campaign trail. November 3rd, now within reach.
The Democrats would terminate our recovery with a draconian, unscientific lockdown like your governor is doing right now for everybody except for her husband.
The president calling out Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer during his swing through 2 Rust Belt states he won in 2016. Supporters chanting "Lock her up" caught the governor's attention, who tweeted, "This is exactly the rhetoric that has put me, my family, and other government officials' lives in danger while we try to save the lives of our fellow Americans. It needs to stop." Meanwhile, the president now capitalizing on a New York Post story featuring emails allegedly tied to Hunter Biden.
I want to thank the New York Post for showing real bravery.
After Twitter initially blocked the story from being shared, the RNC filed a complaint with the Federal Elections Commission, arguing that tweet blocking amounted to an illegal corporate in-kind political contribution to Biden's campaign. The president has just days to prepare for that final face-to-face debate in Nashville on Thursday. After today's rally in Nevada, he'll head to 2 more rallies tomorrow in Arizona, then back to the East Coast for several more rallies later this week. Chris?
David Spunt traveling with the president in Nevada. David, thank you. Now let's bring in Jacqui Heinrich, who's covering the Biden campaign in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Jacqui.
Chris, at the event today, Joe Biden will encourage supporters to vote early. But ahead of Thursday's debate with President Trump, it appears he's keeping a light schedule and tapping surrogates with star power.
Right now, the country, we need Joe Biden.
Saturday, Magic Johnson in Michigan, Elizabeth Warren in Wisconsin. Today, Andrew Yang takes on Pennsylvania, a crucial battleground where President Obama will make his first appearance on the trail later this week, following a campaign memo warning supporters. The reality is that this race is far closer than some of the punditry we're seeing on Twitter and TV would suggest. Facing fallout over those allegations in the New York Post, Joe Biden is trying to keep the focus on his campaign, letting questions linger about the authenticity of the emails and the veracity of their claims.
I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. It's right up your alley. They're the questions you always ask.
The campaign cited Biden's tax returns, official schedule, and a Republican-led Senate inquiry as proof Biden didn't bend U.S. foreign policy to enrich his family. Senator Kamala Harris is also trying to make up for lost time after two people involved with her campaign tested positive for coronavirus, keeping her home for 4 days. Tomorrow she'll head to Florida for the first day of in-person early voting. Chris.
Jacqui, thank you. Joining us now, former Mayor Pete Buttigieg, a member of the Biden.
So I'm not going to show you a Pete Buttigieg clip, but he did keep bringing up COVID-19 and coronavirus, and even though, like I said before I showed the clip, that was total Fox News bias not to bring up COVID-19 and the surge of coronavirus anywhere in that news summary. I mean, the topic almost didn't come up at all, except as I explained before I showed the clip, in terms of the lockdown and then Kamala Harris at the end. But not only did Pete Buttigieg bring it up when he was asked questions about other topics by Chris Wallace, but if you watch the whole Fox News Sunday program, there's a link down in the video description to Fox News Sunday, which I think you can probably watch. There may be some delay before it becomes available for free, but anyway, Bob Woodward was on the panel discussion. I didn't take any clips of that, but there were multiple times where Bob Woodward brought up COVID-19, coronavirus, the January 28th briefing that Trump got from his national security advisor, Robert O'Brien, telling him that COVID-19 was going to be the biggest national security threat during his entire presidency, and yet he basically screwed it up. And anyway, Bob Woodward kept bringing that up, and eventually Chris Wallace said, that's not even he brought it up when they were talking about the Supreme Court. He brought it up, whatever Chris Wallace asked him, he kept bringing that up, because that's the thing that was missing in the news summary. And the one other thing that I noticed, I watched these clips 3 times. Usually the first time I just watch the show and figure out what clips I'm going to take. Then I watch the clips again when I'm capturing them. And then I watch them a third time with you while, together while I'm doing the live stream. And I think it was during the second time I noticed about a minute into that news summary, they show this clip of Trump doing this little dance that his supporter, I think, dancing to the YMCA, the old song from the 70s, right? YMCA. The reason that is important is because the next clip I'm going to show you is something I knew was going to happen. I say this all the time. Chris Wallace and his reporters, David Spunt and Jacqui Heinrich there, give you the news, never mention the biggest story of all, the surge of coronavirus. But Chris Wallace, does sort of commit some journalism later in the show. I think this is more like half an hour into the show. I can't even remember. But finally brings up coronavirus and the 70,000 cases, not so much the surge and how we're screwed in the next 3 months, talking to Jason Miller, this total partisan tool for campaign advisor to the Trump campaign. And you'll see Jason Miller, one of the things he says in his answer is, why don't you show that clip of Trump dancing? And Chris Wallace gets a little bit, I choose the clips, but maybe Chris Wallace doesn't remember that I think it's 58 seconds into that last clip I showed you, they did these 4 different Trump rally clips, and one of them was the Trump dancing clip. So Jason Miller actually got his way. It's another example of Fox News bias, that they did play the clip that the Trump campaign most wanted them to play, whatever Chris Wallace says here. But otherwise, he does cross-examine him somewhat about mask wearing, somewhat about the COVID-19 cases, but not nearly as much as the Trump campaign deserves in this final Fox News Sunday clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together. Oh, and what else he doesn't ask him about? No one ever asked Jason Miller, what about that whole scandal where the Trump campaign hid the money they were paying you so you could claim to the woman who used to work on the Trump campaign, whose child you fathered, denied that you were the father, and then eventually admitted you were the father, but now you're hiding your income so that you don't have to pay her more child support. Why doesn't that ever come up when anyone ever interviews this partisan tool? Not a good person, in my personal opinion, Jason Miller. And anyway, this is what passes for journalism on Fox News. This is maybe Chris Wallace's most journalistic moment that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Support their families.
All right, let's talk about COVID-19. More than 8 million people in this country now have the coronavirus. There have been 220,000 deaths. I believe it was on Friday, 70,000 new cases, which raises the question, why does the president continue to hold these rallies where thousands of people are packed together, the vast majority of them without masks, and the president says this to them?
I'll walk in there, I'll kiss everyone in that audience. I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss.
Why doesn't the president follow his administration's own guidelines at his rallies?
Well, Chris, as you know, we do pass out masks at the rallies, and I encourage everyone who's attending a Trump rally to put the mask on. They're not just giving it to you for Christmas tree decorations later on. We also check folks' temperatures, and we remind people to wash their hands. We give them hand sanitizer. But look, as we get close to the election, people don't want to be living in fear again in their basements. We're going to be strong, we're going to be safe, but we're not going to be scared here, Chris. And especially as we get closer, I mean, I don't see quite the protest from the media side when we see marches on Washington or BLM protests or things of that nature. So if the president wants to have a peaceful protest and have his people get together, then let's do it safely. Let's have some fun. And Chris, I wish you'd shown the clip of the president dancing to YMCA. I think that's become a pretty big hit out on the campaign trail.
Well, you guys have put that out already. And, you know, I get to ask the questions here and put on the clips. But let me ask you about this issue of masks. Because you say, well, you hand out the masks. But the president sends a very mixed message about the idea of wearing masks. I want to show what he said this week and then show what his own administration's top infectious disease expert, Dr. Fauci, said. Take a look.
Look, you have on the masks, you have two stories. You have a story where they want, a story where they don't want.
So we need to put that nonsense behind us about, well, they keep changing their minds. Masks work. Physical distancing works. Avoiding crowds work.
Jason, does the president really think there are two sides to this argument, that there are two sides to whether or not it's safer to wear masks?
Well, Chris, as you've seen, the president has encouraged people to wear masks. He's put that out on Twitter. We've seen him when he's going to Walter Reed Hospital, a number of other places, wearing a mask, when he's touring a lab, when he's not able to socially distance. But the fact of the matter is, masks on their own, while very, very important, are not the cure-all. So, for example, you take someone like President Trump, who frequently the people around him will have their masks on, they'll be tested, and somehow he still got COVID. And so there's a lot about this virus that we don't know, but masks are important. The president has urged people to wear them. And again, if you're attending a Trump rally, I urge you to wear your mask, be safe, wash your hands. We always check folks' temperatures before they come in. But you know what, Chris? We're not going to be scared. We're not going to live in fear. We're going to defeat this virus. And quite frankly, that's a big differential in this race between President Trump and Joe Biden. If you want to defeat COVID, vote for President Trump. If you want to live in your basement the rest of your life, well, Joe Biden's a good option for you.
Well, they're going to get a chance to talk about that in the debate, which their final debate they're going to hold this Thursday, October 22nd. One of Mr. Trump's own debate.
I kept that playing just so you can see no real follow-up on that. I mean, he did at least ask him about it. Didn't ask him about the terrible, terrible situation we're in for the next 3 months. That the clip after next and then the clip after that will definitely support what I'm saying about that. But like I said, that was the closest that Chris Wallace got to actually identifying the real big issue that is hurting the American people most every day. And that's actually what Chuck Todd talks about at the beginning of this clip here with Alex Azar, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, on NBC News' Meet the Press. He talks about how it might be possible that the whole Trump administration strategy is just to let a lot of people get sick until there aren't any more people to get sick anymore, which I talked about that several months ago, calling it necropolitics, or like deciding that the people who die aren't your people, so who cares, or I don't know, but this is about Dr. Scott Atlas, who apparently has replaced Anthony Fauci and Deborah Birx in the coronavirus task force as the most powerful doctor, even though he's not an epidemiologist. I actually personally have some animus against Scott Atlas because he's from Stanford, the Hoover Institute at Stanford, and so a whole bunch of Stanford doctors wrote a letter criticizing Scott Atlas, including my brother, who is a doctor of medicine at Stanford University, and Scott Atlas sued them all for defamation. My brother is being sued by the president's doctor, Scott Atlas. I've even thought about maybe making a video about that. You could let me know if you want to know more about how the president's doctor, Scott, well, he's not actually a treating physician for President Trump. He's more like the most powerful member of the coronavirus task force, I guess. And anyway, you'll see Chuck Todd ask Alex Azar about that, and I don't think he does a great job of cross-examinations, which I'll talk about after we watch the clip. But then he makes up for it by bringing in this other doctor, Michael Osterholm, to give us a reality check. But I'll talk about that in between the two clips after we watch Chuck Todd ask. There's a little intro. The intro on herd immunity comes after, but here's the herd immunity question to HHS Secretary Alex Azar on NBC News' Meet the Press this morning over here.
Let me ask you about Dr. Scott Atlas and the experts he brought in for you to meet with. The president is implying he's open to herd immunity. Is herd immunity now official health policy of the federal government? Is that what the task force is essentially pushing us towards, is some form of herd immunity?
Chuck, I'll meet with individuals who are experts to learn, listen, to hear perspectives. I'll tell you one important part of that interaction was just the real focus on the core need to really protect those most vulnerable. We've done a great job now protecting our seniors, the most vulnerable in our nursing homes, through expanded testing, as well as mitigation efforts and control. When we get our vaccination program, which we launched in Florida through CVS and Walgreens, where they're going to partner with us to be able to vaccinate all of our seniors in nursing homes right away. That's part of that effort. Right. But let me be clear, Chuck. What am I focused on? What's our policy? We're trying to reduce cases, reduce hospitalizations to make sure we stay within our healthcare resources, and reduce fatalities as much as possible so we can get to that day, whether it's weeks or just a couple months away, for monoclonal antibodies to treat and prevent this disease, and vaccine to bring us out of this.
You didn't answer the question on herd immunity. Is that formal policy at this point now?
Well, I think I essentially did, which is no, that's not our policy. It's the desire through vaccination to get to herd immunity, but it may be an outcome of all of those steps. But the desire is reduce cases, reduce hospitalizations, reduce fatalities. That's what I am focused on every day. I wake up every day with that as my mission, and the core to that is get us safe therapeutics and safe vaccines in historic record time. Chuck, look, the Pfizer CEO just announced that by the end of November, he thinks they may be submitting an application for a vaccine 10 months after this pandemic hit our shores. This is incredible, historic news, Chuck, that we ought to be celebrating and have a great sense of optimism for, but also a recommitment. Bridge to that date. Bridge to that date.
Let me ask you a question about the vaccine and the distribution plan.
Okay, and I just kept that playing to show Chuck Todd did not really follow up on some of the misinformation you heard there from Alex Azar. He did stick kind of on that herd immunity question, but and he talked about vaccine distribution, but I saw multiple times in the full interview, beyond just the clip I showed you, that Chuck Todd let Alex Azar get away with saying that we're weeks away from monoclonal antibodies and then months away from a vaccine. He didn't really follow up on the vaccine part, although in the next clip I'm going to show you, he had on Michael Osterholm, this doctor who gives the reality check that kind of contradicts the vaccine part. And so will Dr. Scott Gottlieb in the CBS News Face the Nation clip I show after that. But the one thing about the monoclonal antibodies, that's like the Regeneron cocktail that Trump got, or there's a different company, Eli Lilly, that has a different version of it that I think that Chris Christie got, and he was actually well enough to come back on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this week, although I didn't take any clips of him. But if you watched my show last week, I showed the CEO of Regeneron get heavily cross-examined by Margaret Brennan on the fact that there are only like 50,000 doses of the Regeneron monoclonal antibody cocktail, and that's like, we just had 70,000 cases in a day, so that's not enough. And there are going to be a total of like 300,000, and even I also showed a clip last week where Scott Gottlieb said that he was telling them back in like April that they weren't spending enough to get these monoclonal antibody cocktails in enough numbers to actually help people. And so don't be counting on, 300,000 doses is like a literal drop in the bucket when the bucket is the number of people who have COVID-19 and need some sort of therapy, and 300,000 is, if we're having 70,000 cases a day, that's like 5 days of cases. Anyway, I wanted to point that out. And so Chuck Todd never followed up on the monoclonal antibody thing that Alex Azar said multiple times, but he did at least have Michael Osterholm on to give a reality check on what you just heard from Alex Azar that I will talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
Do you support herd immunity as a strategy?
Oh, and I forgot, it starts, like I said before, the previous clip with this intro from the town hall about herd immunity, and I'll play the clip now and shut up.
Do you support herd immunity as a strategy? Essentially just let people get sick.
The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. We did the right thing. We were expected to lose 2,200,000 people and maybe more than that. We're at 210,000 people.
Welcome back. As my colleague Savannah Guthrie pointed out in Thursday's NBC News Town Hall, what President Trump just said there was not true. The 2 million figure was only if we had done nothing, zilch, zip. which of course nobody was proposing at the time. What you did not hear in that answer was a repudiation of herd immunity, letting people get sick to build up resistance among millions while protecting the most vulnerable from the virus. It is a strategy being promoted by White House Coronavirus Task Force Advisor Scott Atlas. You did hear Secretary Azar say it was not official policy. Well, joining me now is Michael Osterholm. He's, of course, the director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota. Dr. Osterholm, you are here to be our reality check. So let me ask you simply, do you share the optimism that Secretary Azar expressed with us this morning?
I don't, only in the sense that, again, we're not really telling the complete story. We do have vaccines and therapeutics coming down the pike, but when you actually look at the time period for that, the next 6 to 12 weeks are going to be the darkest of the entire pandemic. Vaccines will not become available in any meaningful way until early to third quarter of next year. And even then, half the U.S. population at this point is skeptical even taking the vaccine. So what we have right now is a major problem in messaging. People don't know what to believe. And that's one of our huge challenges going forward is we've got to get the message to the public that reflects the science and reflects reality.
Do you have any idea of who's running the public?
So yeah, that didn't sound good from Michael Osterholm. The next 6 to 12 weeks are going to be the darkest parts of the pandemic. And before I delve into that darkness even more with Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who is Trump's commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. So he's a Republican, but he's still telling us that we are screwed for the next 3 months. But I do want to, I had some more Super Chat contributors, and I want to thank all of you who show up for the live show on Sundays and support me with, the supportive comments, but also with the live contributions, which sort of kind of power the show and show people that I do have some support out there here. Matthew, herd mentality. Oh, and sinful solutions. Whenever I see people talk about convalescent plasma, I always say plasma. It almost sounds like something my former governor here in California, Arnold Schwarzenegger, would say. Plasma. I don't know why Trump says plasma, but where did he get that from? Nobody knows, but I definitely get the plasma reference. And thank you to those Super Chat contributors so far. And now I'm going to show you the second clip telling us that whoever wins the November 3rd election, the next 3 months are going to be really, really dark. Things are bad in Europe, which is, Trump always says, look at what's happening in Europe. Well, we're a few weeks behind Europe again. This is our third spike. At least they're only having their second spike. We're having our third spike, which Scott Gottlieb talks about with Margaret Brennan with a little bit of technical difficulties. I don't know what happened, but makes me feel a little better about some of the technical difficulties I have doing my live stream, where I'm in charge of everything. I'm like the performer on camera. I'm like doing all the production and all the, I'm everything. And so when I see the big corporate news outlets have problems, it makes me think, okay, I'm not doing such a bad job. But Trump did a really bad job, and we're screwed, and we're really going to find out about it for the next 3 months, as Scott Gottlieb talks about in this final CBS News Face the Nation clip tonight over here.
We have now 8 million infections in the United States, record hospitalizations. In terms of the red zone areas the White House is concerned about, 26 states fall into that category. Where are we headed as a country?
Probably the most difficult phase of this epidemic. I think the next 3 months are going to be very challenging. There's really no backstop against the spread that we're seeing. We're probably 2 or 3 weeks behind Europe, and Europe's in a very difficult position right now, too. I think as we enter the winter, we're going to see continued spread. There's 42 states where hospitalizations are rising. There's 45 states where the rate of transfer, the RT, is above 1, meaning they have expanding epidemics. And there's really no backstop. There's not going to be an intervention that really thwarts this, short of the ability to get a vaccine, which is probably an event that happens late in next year.
You point out...
I lost my sound.
I can still hear Dr. Gottlieb. I think we're working on being able to reestablish his audio. Dr. Gottlieb, can you hear me? Okay. We're going to work on fixing that and come back to the conversation with Dr. Gottlieb in a moment. I want to go back now to Dr. Scott Gottlieb. We have fixed that technical issue, we hope. You were just saying, Dr. Gottlieb, but we were headed into a very difficult period. You still predict the vaccine as an event well into 2021. When we look at what's happening right now, there's such an outbreak in the Midwest. In Wisconsin, they had their highest daily case total since the pandemic began on Friday, and residents are being told to avoid crowds. But the president held a rally there just yesterday. He seems to not be adopting any further health restrictions, even after having recovered from the virus himself. How dangerous is this?
I think it's problematic, and I think it's adding to the challenges. Look, the spread we have right now is with the mitigation that we have in place. And so we are taking some steps. If we weren't taking those steps, if people weren't wearing masks generally, and some states weren't adhering to some mitigation tactics, and we weren't testing and tracing, then we'd have much worse spread. And if you look at the White House strategy, they've come out against universal masking. They've come out against testing asymptomatic and mildly symptomatic people. They say testing should be reserved just to the vulnerable. They want businesses and schools reopened, as we all do, and they're against targeted mitigation like closing restaurants. There was criticism of New York when New York kept the restaurants closed. So it begs the question, what is the strategy? And I think the strategy is just to endure the spread until we get to that vaccine. And the reason that's problematic is because even if you get companies filing applications at the end of November, which is what they've said, and I'm on the board of Pfizer, one of the companies developing one of those vaccines, it'll take FDA 2 to 4 weeks to turn that application around. Then it will take us another 2 to 4 weeks to get the initial tranche of people, the most vulnerable who are indicated for the vaccine, vaccinated. Then they need to get a second dose, and that happens in the next 3 to 4 weeks. And then it takes 2 weeks for the immunity really to kick in. So you're looking at a situation where the first tranche of people to get vaccinated really won't be protected from the vaccine probably till February and maybe March. And so that's a long way off. We're going to have to endure this wave of spread right now, and it's probably likely to be the biggest wave that we endure without the benefit of a vaccinated population. So we're going to have to rely on those mitigation steps.
So yeah, maybe even till March before anyone starts to gain immunity from a vaccine. That's more than 3 months. We're November, December, January, February, March. That's 5 months. And that's like the best case scenario on a vaccine. I already told you why the monoclonal antibody cocktails, there just aren't going to be enough doses anytime soon for that to be useful to anyone unless you are like one of the elites, like Donald Trump got it at Walter Reed Medical Center, where he talks about like socialist medicine. Walter Reed is actually a socialist hospital. It's owned by the government. The government owns the hospital. It employs all the doctors. That's government ownership of the means of production. Donald Trump got his great medicine, his great medical care at a socialist hospital, Walter Reed Medical Center. Chris Christie got the Eli Lilly monoclonal antibody cocktail, but very few people get that, and very few people are ever going to get that. And you heard both Dr. Michael Osterholm on NBC and then Dr. Scott Gottlieb on CBS tell us that for the next 3 to 5 months, we are going to go through the darkest part of this pandemic, and I don't enjoy reporting those facts, and since most of it's even going to occur after November 3rd, it's like I'm not even giving you political spin, I'm just giving you the bad news. And speaking of bad news, I think my interpretation of this next clip, which is Nancy Pelosi talking to George Stephanopoulos on ABC about whether there's going to be any coronavirus relief package. This has to do with testing, has to do with finding out whether how the coronavirus pandemic is affecting people of different racial groups in, disparately. More African Americans, more Latinx people are victims of, certainly are indigenous peoples, Native Americans are victims at a much higher rate. So that's one of the things that is stopping this package, this coronavirus relief bill from coming through Congress. But my interpretation of what you're about to see from Nancy Pelosi is that it's most likely there won't be a bill that passes, and Nancy Pelosi says we only have 48 hours to get it done before the election. There's some small chance maybe she's trying to work out a deal, which would be nice for the American people. But I think she's trying to give the next 48 to 72 hours. There are only 16 days until the election. And by saying that the next 2 to 3 days are going to be news coverage of the negotiations, or she's trying to highlight the issue in the next 2 to 3 days, she's taking up 2 to 3 days of the coverage as to, showing how the Trump administration is screwing the American people on COVID-19 relief bill. And she talks about how Trump is trying to create a slush fund where he's trying to change all the wordings in the bill where, they shall do something, which as a lawyer, I know that means that's mandatory language. They have to do what the bill says, and trying to change it to may in terms of the testing, in terms of collecting of racial data. And I kind of cut out a part of this where George Stephanopoulos asked about some other issues, but there was this weird thing at the end where Nancy Pelosi came back to this issue when George Stephanopoulos had actually asked her about the Supreme Court nomination. But there's this great image at the end of this clip of Nancy Pelosi talking about cleaning up after the elephant in the room, or, the Republican elephant, or the elephant in the room that I had to include. That's why this is sort of edited together in the penultimate news clip before you see Trump's daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, get tappered by Jake Tapper in the final clip after this. But here's the Nancy Pelosi clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
A lot of Americans are hurting, as you know, as well, Madam Speaker. I know you've been negotiating with the White House over a possible economic relief package, and you spoke with Secretary Mnuchin last night.
Yes.
Any closer to reaching a deal?
Well, we're seeking clarity because actually, with all due respect to some of the people in the president's administration, they're not legislators. So when they said we're accepting the language on testing, for example, and we're just making a light touch. They said they changed shall to may, requirements to recommendations, plan to a strategy, not a strategic plan. They took out 55% of the language that we had there for testing and tracing. And the tracing part is so important because communities of color have been disproportionately affected by this. So on this subject where we have agreement, we don't have agreement in the language yet, but I'm hopeful. And here's the big difference. Communities of color have more deaths than the white population. Let's just think of this. If you were a child, a Hispanic child has 8 times more chance of going to the hospital with COVID than a white child. A black child, 5 times more chance of going to the hospital than that. That's because we have not addressed the problem, the testing, the tracing, the treatment, the mask wearing, the separation, the sanitation, and all that goes with it. So again, hopefully that we can learn from each other and they understand. And let me just say this. We had pages and pages of how you would do this in the minority community. They crossed it all out. Instead, they put this sentence. Contact tracing will be paid for by the federal government as part of the $75 billion. Okay, we agree with that. But given state difference, each state shall establish a strategy that is appropriate to its circumstances. CDC can provide guidance to the states on elements. Must. But in addition to that, we have to have a national plan. You cannot leave it up to the states.
So if you don't,
how they're going to address the minority community.
If you don't get that agreement, If you don't get that agreement in the 48-hour deadline, you said, what happens?
Well, here's the thing. The 48 only relates to if we want to get it done before the election, which we do.
Well, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, so which we do. But we're saying to them, we have to freeze the design on some of these things. Are we going with it or not? And what is the language? I'm optimistic because, again, we've been back and forth on all of this. You know legislation. Shall is different from may. And the difference amounts to this. If you think of it this simple way, when you say may, you're giving the president a slush fund. He may do this, he may grant, he may withhold. When you say shall, according to the science tell us, must happen. And if we test and trace and treat, mask, separate, ventilate, sanitize, and all the rest of that, we can open our schools.
But
we
Madam
can
Speaker,
open our businesses.
Even if you reach a deal with the White House, somewhere around $1.82 trillion, Leader McConnell has said he's not going to put something like that on the floor of the Senate. So what happens?
Well, he said a number of things. And one of the things that he said, if it was yesterday, but it was reported yesterday, that is if the White House and the House come to an agreement that he would put it on the floor. That is among his many statements. But most of the time he spends laughing, pushing the pause button, telling states to go bankrupt, laughing. When in his debate, did you see that? When Amy McGrath was saying to him, what are you doing about stopping the spread of the virus, et cetera? He laughed. He laughed. This is not funny. The president didn't take it seriously. McConnell has not taken it seriously. But we can stop this if we follow the science and be ready for a vaccine, which I hope will be soon. So again, because we want to have an agreement, we can come to negotiation. And we can do it now. What's the difference? A few days, except that we could have it before the election, which we want it as soon as possible. And I certainly want it because I don't want to have to be sweeping up after this dumpings of this elephant as we go into a new presidency in a few short months.
Madam Speaker, thank you for your time.
Like I said, I like that sweeping after this elephant comment at the end there. And the thing is, I don't know if it's true, but or if it's actually going to happen, but on Thursday, the second and final debate between Donald Trump and Joe Biden is supposed to happen. And that's why I think Nancy Pelosi is trying to take over some of the news cycles in the next 2 to 3 days with her. We have 48 hours to get this done before the election, which means that could be a big story in the next 2 days. And then, of course, on the third day, if it fails, that would be a story. And that sort of takes over 3 of the next 16 days until the election on Trump's failure to negotiate this COVID relief package, even though, of course, like months ago, the House passed over $2 trillion in relief. And Trump has been all over the map, and you saw Nancy Pelosi talking about various things. And I also especially like how she pointed out Mitch McConnell laughing during his debate with his challenger, Amy McGrath, when she brought up his failure to do anything about COVID-19. And it was like this most evil laugh. I should have gotten a clip of that, but it was like, whatever. What is... Mitch McConnell is definitely one of the villains of the 2010 to 2020. Hopefully he's about to lose power. He's about to lose the Senate. I don't know if that's really going to happen. That's what I'm hoping for. Joe Biden and a Democratic Senate, and we can figure out what to do from there. But anyway, the final news clip I want to show you, I promised you this earlier. This is Jake Tapper doing a great cross-examination of Lara Trump, Eric Trump's wife, the daughter-in-law of the president. This is so brutal. Like I said, I think maybe this should be like branded getting tappered. And there were, like I said, there was an earlier part of this interview. The whole thing was pretty brutal. Jake Tapper kept interrupting Lara Trump, saying that she was being dishonest in her answers. And then at one point when he asked about the lock her up chants against Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, she said it was just fun, good fun at the rallies. And he said, lock her up chants against a governor who was recently the victim of a plot to kidnap her and put her on trial. That's not really good fun. But I think the real finale of Lara Trump getting tappered was during the last 2 minutes of the interview, which I will talk about with you a little more after we watch that together. Oh, this is also one of the things I said about the dueling town halls was that it showed Trump to be this dishonest blowhard and Biden to be this genial old centrist white guy politician from the 20th century or whatever. Well, this also shows how Biden is a nice guy and Trump and his family are total assholes. For the final news clip that I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Okay, I want to ask you a couple things about things that you've done on the campaign trail. Joe Biden, as we all know, has worked to overcome a stutter. And one of the speakers at the Democratic convention was a young boy who the vice president inspired, named Braden Harrington. Take a listen.
It was really amazing to hear that someone like me became vice president.
Braden Harrington, a very brave young boy. You made this comment earlier in the campaign about Joe Biden. Let's take a listen to that.
Every time he comes on stage or they turn to him, I'm like, Joe, can you get it out? Let's get the words out, Joe. You kind of feel bad for him.
How do you think it makes little kids with stutters feel when they see you make a comment like that?
First and foremost, I had no idea that Joe Biden ever suffered from a stutter. I think what we see on stage with Joe Biden, Jake, is very clearly a cognitive decline.
Okay.
That's what I'm referring to. It makes me uncomfortable
You have
to watch somebody on stage
that's so amazing. It's so amazing to me that
try and figure out an answer.
A cognitive decline.
Well, when you're trying to tell me that what I was suggesting was
I think that you were mocking his stutter.
Yeah,
I think you were mocking his stutter, and I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline. I would think that somebody in the Trump family would be more sensitive to people who do not have medical licenses diagnosing politicians from afar. Plenty of people have diagnosed your father from afar, and I'm sure it offends you. Your father-in-law from afar. I'm sure it offends you. You don't have any standing to say.
I'm not diagnosing him. What I'm saying, Jake,
you just talked
is
about
that
a cognitive decline.
That Joe Biden
I have
is
one last
struggling
question for you, Lara. You can't
times on stage, and it's very concerning to a lot of people that this could be the leader of the free world.
Okay.
That is all I'm saying. I genuinely feel
Lara
sorry
Trump.
for Joe Biden.
I appreciate it. I'm sure it was from a place of concern. We all believe that. Lara Trump, thank you so much. Coronavirus cases are back.
People use the term lol a lot, laugh out loud. When you said, oh, I'm sure we all believe it's from a place of concern. I definitely laughed out loud when I heard that. I actually laughed multiple times during Jake Tapper's, he is, sick of Trump's shit, basically, if you watch the entire State of the Union interview with Lara Trump and also his commentary at the end. I'm more and more a Jake Tapper fan, and that clip, I think, supports why that is. Anyway, I appreciate all of you who showed up to watch the live stream. I do have a brief Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip for you all. This was recorded when it was still dark out this morning when I was watching Jake Tapper interviewing Lara Trump. And I think you can actually hear a little bit of that interview in the background for the final Dash and Sandy or Dandy clip tonight over here.
Say very negative things about this president.
That's not the case with Kelly. That's not the case with Kelly.
The bottom line is, regardless, he.
So that's it. Dash and Sandy going out into the morning darkness together. I guess next week or 2 weeks from today will be. I said 16th and 18th. It's actually the 17th. Did I say it was October? So today's the 18th. So that means next week is the 25th, and then the week after that is November 1st. So that means that 2 weeks from tonight will be daylight savings time. And so maybe it won't be so dark in the morning when I'm watching Jake Tapper. That's what I was meaning to say there. But anyway, I hope you all appreciated the time I spent picking out all these clips and adding my commentary and criticism. I appreciate all of you who showed up to watch the live show, who gave me supportive comments, financial contributions through various ways at the links down in the video description, and also the recorded show viewers. I will be hopefully doing a live stream next Friday, sometime Friday afternoon, my time, of the debate that will hopefully happen Thursday night, the second and final debate between Trump and Biden. Maybe I'll have some reason to upload something. I certainly didn't expect to do 2 live streams last week, so who knows what will happen this week. But I guess until whatever that is that happens, or until next Sunday, I will be seeing all of you around the internet.